Well, hey, gamers. Welcome to Blue Gamer Bluecast Morning Show. It is September 4th, 2024. Getting further into September. There's a lot of cool releases coming out. But hey, I am Adam Blue, 30 plus year video game enthusiast. So I have a lot to talk about, a lot to share when it comes to like industry insights. A lot of interesting industry stuff has gone on today. We'll be talking about Concord. Was there some other interesting news I saw? Yeah, there's some other news that we're going to be bringing up as well on top of what I've been playing. So I'm interested in that because a lot of times in the morning I start getting ready, just start casually gathering news as I would in the morning, but instead of reading it, I kind of wait for the show. Sometimes, depending on what the news is about, I'll prep. Sometimes I'm just already prepped because it's stuff I'm researching anyway, right? But yeah, it's fun to go through what some of the latest industry happenings are because it kind of tells us what might be coming in the future. That's why I'm excited to talk about today's news. Excited, I don't know. Well, I think video game stuff gets me excited in ways that others don't. But that's just me. That's a me problem. All right. Well, let's get this started real quick just to talk about what I played yesterday. And actually, it wasn't a lot. I think that might have had to do with the do a profile scan real quick. Just had to do, I think, with the weekend where I was playing so much that I think yesterday, while I did play, I kind of just chilled a bit. Um, and then we were gonna all like go out and do something, but it's been raining all day, which is it's fine actually, because I feel like finally where we live, we're transitioning from the summer to the fall because we've had so many 100+ degree days of weather. It's been high in the 80s lately, but it's been raining all day. So, okay. So let's look at this. Interesting that it's showing the last time I played Star Wars Outlaws was on the 31st. I don't think that's true. So this isn't updating, or the Ubisoft part isn't updating for some reason. That's interesting. Yeah, it's like not a big deal in the grand scheme of things of life, but I'm like, why isn't that updating on here? Anyway, a lot of weird things happening with Outlaws. I think I talked about it yesterday where you had to like change how memory is utilized in order for it to not crash. The crossplay doesn't work on Xbox. It's kind of disappointing. But anyway, I just played a little bit more Gundam Breaker 4. I had a review that went up on the Gundam Explained YouTube channel of the game Gundam Breaker 4. It's not a review that would go up on this channel just because it's interesting. If you're not into Gundam, I don't think you're going to care about this game too much. And so since I'm into Gundam, the game was fun. So yeah, if you're interested, check that out over on the Gundam Explained channel. I will say that, since this is the more gaming centric channel, I'll give like a little mini review that as a Gundam fan and a fan of video games, it's fun. But if you're looking for a specific type of experience when playing a game, you're not going to get it here. This game it's very button mashy, grindy just to get parts. And you don't really have to think about the combat too much, but you might like that. And yeah, I guess that's about it. So the other thing that I was doing, and it doesn't show up here actually, is on the Meta Quest, I've been playing a Warhammer 40K game called Battle Sisters, which it's actually really awesome. It's just like Half-Life Alyx. It's first-person shooter. I have, both of my hands where I can like, pick up guns, use swords. You have like abilities where you can even use your voice. Anyway, you're running around levels just like a first-person shooter, shooting, headshot. I mean, it's really, really well done. But the thing that I felt with this game that I did with Half-Life Alyx is after some time, I start feeling a little nauseated. It's not bad, but it's enough to where it's like I'm just uncomfortable. And that stuff, some sessions I can go a long time without it happening, and then sometimes it's right away. I don't know. It's kind of, and it really depends on what it is that I'm doing. Because there's that Gundam VR coming out pretty soon. I'm hoping that I can go through long sessions of that. But anyway, so this Warhammer 40,000 Battle Sisters, surprisingly fun. There's a meta sale right now with the games. It might be over now, but it was like 30% off if you use the code. I want to say it was September SEP30. Maybe that's it. Check it out. But anyway, there's a lot of promise with VR games. I think I wonder if part of it is that nausea, because I'm not the only one that gets it. And so it's like I think you have to almost practice to get out of having nausea from VR. If you don't get, if you don't get it already, you're fine. I get it very little and sometimes not at all. It's very strange, but when I do, it's like I really feel it, because I played all of Star Wars Squadrons in VR. But anyway, I'm saying I think that's what's maybe keeping this stuff from being like super like the next moneymaker thing, is just because you can't get that whole audience yet. I think it's like a generation needs to grow up with VR being regularly available, so that we kind of build that balance in ourselves to not get nauseated when playing, something like that. All right, well, let's see. Is that really it from what I've been playing? Yeah, because it's not like there's too much going on there. Okay. Yeah, yes. Some days I don't do too much. Okay, let's go to. Oh, you know what we could talk about real quick, because this is a news item, but then we're going to get into more news. But Concord, PlayStation, Sony shutting down Concord. This was that free to play, not free to play. That was the problem. This was that paid retail $40 game that was just a hero shooter, looter shooter, more of a hero shooter, more of an Overwatch. It got announced a while back. Never looked interesting. In fact, I totally forgot about it until, was it the Summer Game Fest where they showed it off again, or no, the Sony showcase or whatever earlier this year. And then just looking at it, it just looked like generic mush. And I feel bad for saying that, because there's people that worked on that love what they worked on. But each individual probably contributed in an amazing way, but a culmination of what was put together is it looked like it was just checking boxes, and Sony wanted to buy the studio because, like, oh, look, they're making a game that's checking all the boxes. Even as far as, and I think we've been seeing this, which is very interesting, to where a lot of the checked boxes are about, the DEI stuff, which again, inherently not a bad thing. It's just once you're chasing check boxes, who knows how a game's going to turn out, So anyway, and it's not even like that stuff. It's not like even the DEI stuff even was apparent to me actually when they showed the trailer. It was just like, oh, this is a game that just looks goofy there, but it's like the same thing as everything else. It kind of, and that's the other thing. I think it's almost like they tried to do Guardians of the Galaxy. Anyway, yeah, and that's another example. It's like it looks like it's checking a lot of boxes instead of trying to be its own thing. It's funny. David Jaffe brought up something that I thought was a great thought, is why not have just made this where it's all the Sony characters, PlayStation characters? And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, because from what I understand, the gameplay is fine. It's just, if gameplay is just okay, what's the other reason? And this actually goes back to that Gundam Breaker 4. The Gundam Breaker 4 gameplay is just fine. It's not that great. But within the world of Gundam, and you're collecting Gundam parts and building Gunpla, that's then what kind of makes it take it to the next level of being something interesting. So for Concord, with its whatever its IP, the story, the fiction, no one knows what it is, but they said they have these movies coming out every week, but it doesn't already have a built-in fan base, so it's not like people are like, oh yeah, what's going to happen next? So that was a very interesting. It's so interesting lately, even with Xbox, to see these choices, these decisions they make. Another thing I'm curious about too is like Sony. Yeah, and if I wasn't clear, Sony has made it where Concord is now offline. There's no playing it. So if you want to like go to Target and grab a physical copy ASAP before They're it's sold out for good. That might be worth something in the future. It reminds me of Anthem. I remember when Anthem first came out, like it was already gone before I even got a chance to play it. And I did end up playing it eventually. But it's very interesting. Think about it. Sony, biggest one of the biggest video game companies, if not the second biggest after Nintendo, um, shuts down their game, their live service game. It's just crazy to think. And it's almost too like it was like, yeah, no, duh. I mean, just looking at the trailer when it first came out, it's like, what are they doing? But that's what's crazy about it, because when you look at the trailer, you see some cool CGI and interesting characters, but that's not the game. So for one, the game itself was being hidden behind them pushing this IP. Um, it's very interesting. Chris is saying some people are overreacting on the bad character design. The gameplay said to be very solid. Yeah, even character design. It's like I don't think that's really the problem. I think that I'm sure some of the decisions with the character design, are in line with some of the decisions in general that it's just crazy to think how many people didn't play it when Microsoft had Redfall come out, and even though it wasn't that great, they were still supporting it, and then they even patched it to make it where you could play offline. So did Redfall have more players than Concord? That's kind of interesting. I would say if it was all Sony characters, then some people would still find a way to complain. Yeah, that's true. That's true, but I think people tend to complain about everything. But yeah, the Sony characters thing would be great. They need to do that. I think that's the one thing Sony just misses the mark on, and it seems like they understand it with that Astrobot coming out here pretty soon. Can't wait. Got it pre-ordered. Because that's more about a Sony thing, the Astrobot. Redfall was day one on Game Pass. You know what? That is a good point, Chris. Redfall was day one on Game Pass. Sony did not have an equivalent for Concord, which they should have. Very interesting. And you know what? That says a lot too. Like, and this goes for Redfall and Concord. It's like, okay, if someone's subscribed to your service, make it to where, there's a period of time where these games are available to play, like far before it's released, almost like a early access. Yeah, Game Pass should allow you to have early access without paying for some of these first-party games that, these studios want to make sure that are going in the right direction, because you are contributing by being a part of Game Pass. You're contributing to the services that, Microsoft or whoever continues ongoing. So being a part of shaping that service would be a big deal. And these games need these early access periods anyway, so that these publishers can make sure they're shaping the games to be fun. Like, what if Concord had a period of early access? And a lot of times early access would be like a year, I think would be a good, that seems like a long time, but I noticed a lot of games that tend to have a year in early access tend to do a lot better. Like that Starship Troopers Extermination from early access, which I thought was still like, hey, this is good for Starship Troopers, to now. And then it's going to have a single player. But anyway, Concord thing, I think, is so fascinating that this actually happened, and it's a Sony game that they're just shutting down, trying to chase the live service. And it's just a game that has the DEI. It doesn't mean the DEI was the issue, but I think it's related. Very interesting. Okay. Let's jump into some of this other news I came across. Let's see. Okay, so Andy Robinson and Christopher Dring both have information that there's some Switch 2 reveals that will be happening this month. I'm not too sure, what their history is exactly with revealing this type of information. Let's see if there's any other information in here. Yeah, nothing really on there that's really saying anything. It's interesting with this Switch 2. Like I think stuff like Switch 2, GTA 6, right? That's the next one. Those are things that are really going to make the industry maybe exciting again. Yeah, I'm really curious about Switch 2. And just thinking like DS, like I really thought they were gonna go in a direction with dual screens. And then I see what they did with the DS collection on the Castlevania DS collection, where they were really like, well, yeah, we'll make it where one of the screens are here, and then there's two screens on the side, and it fills up that 16 by 9 space. So I think there is and using the analog as a mouse click or touch screen. So there's opportunity to take those classic 3DS, DS games to make them work on modern systems. But I was almost hoping that the Switch 2 would have some sort of dual screen setup, because I do think there is value in having a second screen where you can get extra information and stuff like that. Anyway, it's just fun that we're getting more rumors about Switch 2. Let's see. Was there something else on here? Um, yeah, I don't think there's anything too crazy. Capcom prepping for a Dragon's Dogma 2 DLC announcement. That would be great. It would be interesting to see what it actually is, to see if it actually pulls me back in. I felt like I was on a journey with that game. Oh, here we go. This is what I wanted to show off. This is the Street Fighter Twitter. We're excited to announce that after technical discussions with our partners at Microsoft, we can confirm that excuse me, that Capcom Fighting Collection 2 will release on Xbox One. So that's very interesting, because this means that they got around that empty framework. I think that's what it's called. Issue where empty framework games developed, Capcom developed games using their empty framework engine wasn't working correctly for Xbox backwards compatibility. And it's interesting because this game isn't going to be on PS5, just PS4. So it's cool that Microsoft, it's very interesting. So Microsoft was working with them to get this done, but then there's also, and I forget what the games are, I apologize, but there was that the news that broke about there's a couple games that weren't working on Xbox, and the developers were like, well, Sony is actually just helping us port. Microsoft hasn't helped us port it over. So it is very interesting that I guess the porting thing is way bigger than I thought. I thought that nowadays it was easier to port. That's still a lot of work. Maybe it's easy relative to how complex game development is getting, and that's what it means. But to the point, like with Black Myth Wukong, with Baldur's Gate, like there's these issues where it's not working on. It's hard to get it to work on Xbox, but Sony then. I think it's the developer reaches out and like, hey, we want to get this game to work. We're having this issue, and it's like Sony will work with these developers. Not that Xbox doesn't, but I think it's just a weird thing where sometimes, Sony's like looking at a list of games, Black Myth Wukong. Okay, we'll help get that done, and Microsoft's probably not thinking much of it, until it looks like it's becoming a huge game, and then it's not going to be on Xbox. Now they're scrambling. Interesting how all that stuff works. It's just interesting because I just did my Gunner Breaker 4 review, and that's a game that's not on Xbox, which is odd, and there's no crossplay. But it's interesting that Square Enix, a Japanese game studio that's pretty big, obviously with Final Fantasy, announced that they're making sure all their games are going to be on Xbox. So it's completely different ways of going about marketing and selling your games. So it's very important that all of these companies are working to make sure their games are working on all the platforms. So it's really cool to see that this is happening. I just hope it works then with, there was a couple others, like I want to say the Marvel vs. Capcom collection. There was another Capcom thing. Anyway, so yeah, hopefully they get that worked out. All right, what is next? Let's jump into some of the latest news. Let me do a little refresh just in case. Okay, what? HR Summit? Yeah. Okay, Microsoft apologizes to Giamma Games over and not Tria. Oh, you know what? This is what I was talking about, I think. The Last Sony? That's funny. That was supposed to be the last song. Has been indefinitely delayed on Xbox due to communication issues with Xbox, and how now updated players that Microsoft has since apologized. So this is what I was talking about. Very interesting that this actually came up. Let's see. Microsoft contacted us and said, sorry about the situation. We're trying to solve everything as soon as possible. So, okay, at the time of writing, Giamma Games is yet to confirm when Anatria will be released on the Xbox version. But the game will launch on PC and PlayStation 5 on September 19th, 2024. So that's really soon. So that's what's probably interesting. This game's coming out soon. They're drumming up marketing. And people are like, is it coming out on Xbox? And they're like, we haven't got it to work yet. And it's using Unreal Engine 5. So again, a engine that you think it's easy to port games, but now we're again seeing another example where it seems like it's hard to port. Yeah, and this is that Bloodborne, like Italian Bloodborne. Oh, sorry. Let me share this real quick. Yeah, so this is what it looks like. Unreal Engine 5. Anyway, Microsoft reportedly apologized. Yeah, so but I guess it's hard for a company like Microsoft. They probably have so many companies reaching out to them, so many different games, and they're kind of like, okay, like I was saying with Sony, like Sony just went down the list. They're like, okay, Black Myth Wukong will help with that. Yeah, I'm sure they come across that, and but I guess that's how you do. You have to go on social media and make noise for your game. I mean, I guess that's what you got to do. Midnight Hatter, man, I've been seeing more and more issues with UE5 than benefits. Yeah, that's what it seems like. Never heard of these issues on UE4. Yeah, it didn't seem like porting and to multiple consoles seemed like an issue. Even the 360 era, it seemed like that was the thing. Unreal Engine powered everything. Okay. It's got to be hard to make something bad. Okay. Destiny mobile game, Destiny Rising announcement may arrive soon. Yeah, there's some rumors about it being like you select heroes that you use. So I don't know. It's Destiny mobile. No. How many players does a game like Concord need to survive? That's a good question. The days of the game's launch, it had sold an estimated 25,000 copies, 10 on Steam, 15 on PlayStation. The player counts were low, according to. That's interesting. It sold that many, yet not that many people were even playing it. That's so wild. Concord peaked at 697 concurrent users on August 24th, the day after launch, and dropped sharply after that. Very interesting. Wow, 39 people were playing Monday morning. All right, prototype of canceled PS2 game The Last Job has been made available for download. Really? That actually sounds pretty interesting. A PS2 game, The Last Job. This is giving me like Dead Rising, or not Dead Rising, Dead to Rights vibes. You know, I don't know if you guys remember Dead to Rights. Interesting. I'm going to.
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Games That Won.
All these ads.
Today, we're
yeah, you can tell that very much looks like a PS2 game. Yeah, Dead to Rising, Dead to Rights. I guess some debugging. Interesting. So let's see. The game was worked on by around 40 people for roughly a year and was shown behind closed doors during E3 2004. Planned for PS2 and Xbox, the game was to have players taking control of 4 criminals, each with their own special abilities. Acclaim also reportedly brought in former SCS member John McKellies for a team building exercise, blah, blah, blah. Interesting. So it looks like a lot was put into this game. A year of development. That was probably a long time back then. The running is very reminiscent of Siphon Filter. Okay. Acclaim. Wow. So that's who it was. I was about to say, who did this? It was Acclaim. Chris, you're saying Concord was doing a lot better than X Defiant? That's interesting. So I've played X Defiant. I think it's really fun, but with Call of Duty, it's like, why do I need to play X Defiant? So I could see X Defiant not doing too great. I don't know if that's the case though. All right, that looked pretty cool. Let's see what else is going on. It's weird how there's back and forth drama about Black Myth's delay on Xbox. If it's saying it's not platform limitations, and it's probably not. And it's interesting because it's not that Sony was paying for an exclusive; they just paid to get people to help get the game running on PlayStation. So they paid, and it became an exclusive, but they weren't paying for it to have an exclusive, and they have to do extra work to get it to work. It's not that it's a technical limitation. It's just that there's extra work. So it's kind of weird how it's a very specific scenario that makes it seem like it could be paid exclusivity or that there's technical limitations, but it's not. It's like in the middle. Yeah. Ubisoft share price falls to 10-year low after Star Wars Outlaws launch. I don't know what that means. Did it not do that great? It's funny because Star Wars Outlaws is a good game. It's probably the best in terms of mechanics for open world. It's just that nothing about it is new or different. So if it didn't have a Star Wars skin, you might not care. If it didn't have a Star Wars skin, but this was released years ago and it was something else, it would be huge because of just everything about it. It's a very interesting situation. Yeah, it's like one of those things where when they greenlit this was an excellent idea. But the time it takes to make these games, usually by the time they come out, those ideas have passed. It's almost like Concord. Concord seemed like probably an excellent idea at the time and probably would have done well. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, Warhammer 43 Space Marine 2 campaign length explained. I cannot wait to play this. I have this pre-ordered along with Astrobot, and I can't believe these games come out around the same time. I'm not gonna have time. I'm gonna have to make time. Is Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine on Game Pass? Answered. I hate this, but I click through anyway. No, and I didn't think so. They would usually have shared something like that. Like if it's Space Marine 2, because that's pretty big. That would have been a good idea for Xbox to do. Wow. NVIDIA GeForce RTX 50 series to consume more power than 40 series. And I think I saw this before, but like I think they're getting to a point where they get their own power supply or something. I mean, it has to at some point because I don't think that's just good. Okay. Space Marine 2 roadmap. Yeah, there's a roadmap that goes out pretty far. Even like the 4th season has like a horde mode. It's like, why isn't that in the original? But yeah. Let's see. Oh, look at the screenshot. I'm so down for the Space Marine 2 game. It's gonna be so fun. And I can't believe Tim Willits of id Software fame is working on it. It just tells me it's gonna be a good game. Spectre Divide. Here's another one of those shooters. Okay, anything else? All score streaks in Black Ops 6 and how to unlock them. Wow, that was fast. Wasn't that? Yeah, I guess that's about it. What was the interesting news, I think, really is the Concord stuff. It's really crazy that Sony cancels or shuts down one of its main games that I'm sure they were banking on. Because what other releases have they or do they have this year? Astrobot. But to me, that's like a completely different type of thing. It's a thing they need to do, but they don't have that equivalent action game. They had Helldivers 2, which wasn't even really them, but they had Helldivers 2 and they had Stellar Blade. So they kind of had a good amount of action, but not the real like first-person shooter. Sony needs a first-person shooter. I think, thinking of Call of Duty, even though it's still going to be on PlayStation, it's a Microsoft thing now. It's Xbox thing. And Sony could go back to Killzone, Resistance, and just be like, okay, we already have these IPs. What can we do to actually make a sticky game, a good game? Because I've played all the Killzone games, and they are fine. It's one of those things. They're fine. They don't do anything to move the needle. And I guess I'm talking like first-person shooter, but I think you can take a genre and be like, okay, what can we do with it to make it unique in our own? I think Microsoft did that with Halo. And unfortunately, instead of doubling down on Halo, they kind of just left it to rot and then just paid a lot of money for Call of Duty to get their shooter fix. So it's like they had potential with Halo, and Bungie then went to Sony, and Sony shut them down. So it's so weird how that all worked. But yeah, Sony could have used Destiny, maybe Marathon. I feel like Sony could make a first-person shooter. They have the superhero action now with Spider-Man, and I think they need to configure God of War to make it play more classic, but just modernize it. And then Horizon, I don't know what to do about that. But it's not like Microsoft's in any better situation. Just interesting to see what happened to Redfall. Interesting that in what is it in these situations? These games are different. I think there's a lot of different things that have to occur for a game to be or to not be, to be or not to be successful. Timing, developers, marketing, how it's being marketed, how people are talking about it online, what the IP is. If it's a new IP, what does the IP do that's new or different or interesting? What are some games that are some brand new IPs that are popular? I mean, we look at Black Myth Wukong, but it's kind of based on an older IP. So, yeah, this kind of goes back to Sony, Concord. It was a mistake, I think, pushing Concord the way they did when they could have pushed their own IP. And they have tons of it. But anyway, that's it for today. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and I will continue this again tomorrow. So until then, be cool. See y'all.